Well, welcome back. What a show we have today. I have 3 questions for you, though. Number 1, if you had the opportunity to ask a successful CEO any question you wanted to, what would it be? Number 2, what do you do to help build a trust-based culture in your organization? What can you do? And number 3, do you think it's easier to be the leader at the top? Those are 3 questions that we're going to talk about in just a minute. Here we go.
Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolosky, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
So today's segment is a very special segment. You can see my hard hat here. This is TDIndustries, my sponsor from the beginning, and I am so proud of that. TD is celebrating its 75th anniversary. What a feat. TD is a values-driven premier mechanical construction and facility services organization. It's employee-owned, and it's guided by true servant leadership. At TD, everyone is called a partner. We're honored to have with us today the legacy leader who was at TD for 52 years and served as CEO since 1980. And then board chair on the board of directors through 2016. I got to ask lots of questions to Jack Lowe, and many were from you, actually, our loyal listeners. And so I can't wait. Let's get started. Welcome, Jack Lowe.
Thank you, Valerie.
You're in my living room. I can't believe it.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
And you know, Jack, when we had our pre-interview, which thank you again for taking, my goodness, you almost took an hour and a half with me.
Sorry.
That was awesome. No, I learned the backstory. And you know, so much of the stories that we have on our show, what makes them so powerful is learning the backstory, learning about you, the man, not just you, the CEO of a successful company. And so I have to tell you, my listeners, what I said. I said, I feel like I need to say Mr. Lowe. And you just quickly said, I'm Jack. Just like that. And then we went. And so, first of all, I want to thank you for your service in our armed services in the Navy. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
As well as your service at TD. So we want to talk today on this show, Jack, about the journey of the company and the journey of you in the company. Your dad, when he started the company, came out of the military.
Right.
I'm just going to sit back. I've got my coffee water in hand. And I want you just to tell us a little bit about those early beginnings, 75 years ago.
Yeah. Well, of course, I was 6 years old, so I don't remember it all too well. I certainly wasn't involved in any of the planning. But when Dad got out of the military, he moved back to Dallas. We moved back to Dallas. We'd been living in Georgia. And moved in with his mother in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath duplex. My mother and Dad and my sister and I all lived there for several months. And Dad started TDIndustries, called it Texas Distributors back then. And his aunt, his mother's sister, owned an automotive supply store in downtown Dallas. And she lent him, or back, I think signed a note for $10,000. And
that's a lot of money back then.
Back then, yeah. And let him set a desk up in the warehouse of her little store. And I remember riding a streetcar down there to see him. But, and that's how it started. And a year or so later, they built their first little office and up on Live Oak. And rest is history.
What did he do? What did he start doing right out of the services? And
well, he wanted to be in the distribution business,
okay.
Texas Distributors. Problem was you couldn't get anything to distribute right after the war. So they started servicing water coolers and window air conditioners and little whatever they could find to work on. And it evolved over time to what it is today, where building huge buildings and
Oh my goodness.
managing all kinds of facilities. And
How big is the company now? How many offices and where you service?
Let's see, headquarters in Dallas, have another office in Richardson, an office in Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Phoenix, and Denver. I think I got a couple of little offices out in West Texas, so I don't even know about that. And they're last year, or year before last, they did about $700 million in revenue and had about 3,000 employees. That went down about 10% this year, which is not much compared to what a lot of other companies have done.
That's for sure.
But and they think it'll rebound this year. But,
of course it will.
We'll see.
Then go back to the company started and it started being successful. Now you were growing up
Yeah.
and went to school. Tell us about that. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't know. I was just cruising along, but I got graduated from high school in '57. I was a football player. I had number of scholarship offers. Went to Rice, where Dad had gone, and didn't get to play because my knee got messed up, and I never played much. But I was an engineer. Dad was an electrical engineer. I was taking electrical engineering too.
Took after your dad.
But I thought when I got out of the Navy, I enrolled in Harvard to get an MBA. And my intention was to be CEO of General Electric.
Why not?
Modest ambition. And my wife had just gotten out of college. She had, you thank me for my service in the Navy. I was in the Navy for 2 years. I got Navy pay, but I was actually assigned to the Manned Spacecraft Center working with the first 3 groups of astronauts. As a sort of technical support, there's about 8 or 10 of us that were technical support to the first 3 groups of astronauts. So my wife got to finish her degree at Rice and got a teaching certificate, and we went to Boston and thought, well, she's going to get a job as a teacher, and I'll go to Harvard, and we won't build up too bad a debt. And this was 9 months after Kennedy had been assassinated in Dallas, and she couldn't get a job because of that. And so came back to Dallas and went to work for Dad.
Well, did you just walk in one day? How did you?
Well, I phoned him. I said, I decided not to stay. I was in my dorm. I mean, we were there. And it was a week before school started. And said, what do you think about me coming to work for you? And he says, well, let me think about it. So a couple of days later, he called me back and said, okay.
What's there to think about?
I expect he wanted to talk to some others and stuff. I don't know. That's what he said to me. And then he said, okay. So I came back and went to work as a gopher in the service department, checking invoices and piddling around.
What was it like to work for your dad and piddle around from the bottom?
Yeah.
Because he didn't just say, here, son, here's a department.
No. I didn't work for Dad. Well, probably 6 or 8 years later, when after a year or so in the service department, they moved me over to the wholesale department. We still had Texas distributors. We were in the wholesale business at the time. And the guy had been one of the first guys Dad hired, Fred Addison, that was running that. And he kept giving me all his work, seemed like. And I thought, well, come on, you can do your stuff and let me do, because I had some other stuff I was supposed to do too. And then all of a sudden, a few years into it, he retired. Dad didn't know it was going to happen. Nobody knew it was going to happen. But he had, his estate had come into some money, and so he was just getting me ready, as it turned out. He mostly irritating me, but it turned out he was getting me ready. So I ran the wholesale business there for 10 years. And then, but that's when I started working directly for Dad. And
so then what happened in terms of these living room settings?
Yeah, see, I got there in '64. in the late 60s, maybe 70, we were going through some growing pains. And what Dad decided to do was have a series of all-day meetings with typically 15, 16, 17 partners from around the country, around the company. There's about 300 altogether back then. And that you wouldn't be a department, it would be randomly selected from around the company. Your immediate supervisor would not be there. And Dad had come across this little pamphlet by Robert Greenleaf called The Servant as Leader. And when you got your invitation to come to the meeting, it was in there, and it said, this is one of the things we're going to talk about. And we were just talking about what's going on, and we were sort of struggling, and had a lot of people that were moving into leadership roles that were struggling in their leadership roles. And you know, we were typically taking the best plumber, making him plumbing foreman, and the best accountant and making an accounting manager. And they had tons of experience and expertise in plumbing or accounting or engineering or whatever it was, but not much in leadership. And as complicated as plumbing is, it's not near as complicated as people. And so out of these all day, 6-8 hour discussions, and maybe 2 hours was spent on this pamphlet. They were talking about all kinds of things. It took about 1.5 years to get to everybody in the company. And two things, a lot of things came out of it, but two big things. One, our first ever sort of mission statement. We called it a people objective. And I can't tell you exactly what it said, but it says, you know, people are important here to the extent one person doesn't succeed, that's a major failure or something like that. But the other thing we came out of it is we kind of like this idea of servant leadership. We don't understand it. We don't know what to do with it, but we're going to embrace it as our model, and we're going to try and figure out how to build it into our company. And so we've been working at that for 50 years and hadn't built a perfect servant leader yet, but we've made a lot of progress.
You mean people aren't ever going to get perfect?
No, darn them.
Not yet, darn them.
Damn humans.
You know, one of the things you said was that I can just picture this, and I'm so glad we're in a living room set, because you said your mom cooked spaghetti and meat sauce for every group.
Yep.
And it would have been nice had she been able to do that night after night, but
yeah, not have to rearrange the living room.
Right.
Because we had to move all the furniture back and put the chairs in a circle every time, and then she'd move them all back. But Dad said, no, I need some time between these meetings to think about what the last one said.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
well, what we know is that food is an equalizer.
Yeah.
And so, you know, since we are in my living room, Jack, I have something that's not quite the same as your mom's meat sauce and spaghetti, but it's from the same country. And I'd like to give it to you and have you open it up.
Oh, my goodness.
And so there you are.
Wow.
It's lasagna.
Lasagna.
You don't have to open it,
Okay.
but you take that home
I
and
will.
you
Thank
eat
you.
it
Thank
as
you.
a memory for those days.
Thank
Because you're welcome. I want to pull back to that. The servant leadership. We hear about that all the time. And I shared with you that I became a part of the servant leadership movement.
Right.
So I'm very familiar with it.
Of course.
It's hard to explain to people what it is. You've been doing it now for many years. How do you operationalize something called servant leadership?
Well, trying to think. We did tons of, not training, development.
Development.
And McGee Cooper says it's not training, it's development.
Right.
Around servant leadership. At first, Bob Greenleaf, the author, Dad was buying these things. He was also using them in the community. He was very active in the community. I get people today tell me, your dad gave me that pamphlet in 1972.
Isn't that something?
But so he was buying hundreds of them, and Bob wrote him, said, you know, you're 90% of my business. What are you doing with those things? So we were the first. Dad was the first guy to really buy a bunch of those pamphlets, and so Bob and Esther, his wife, came down and spoke to groups. We get some people together in the evening, and he talked to us. And Willis Tate, who is the chancellor, head guy at SMU, I don't know what the title is, was a friend of Dad's, and he did, I think, 5 lectures on leadership. And but then Mother introduced Dad to Ann McGee Cooper, and she was a young professor, and he asked her, they gave her the pamphlet and asked her to read it and come back and said, "Can you help us build some courses around this?" And she said yes, and she did it for 45 years, or whatever long it was, a long time, till she died, 5 years ago or so?
Yes.
Yeah. She and her organization. Yeah. And but we had, Stephen Covey came and spoke to us. We used to go see Peter Drucker in New York regularly.
Tell us about that. That's pretty amazing.
Well, it was pretty neat. We'd sort of the 4 or 5 key execs and our wives, and so it was a little bit of a boondoggle too. We'd go to New York and go to 2 days of lectures or presentations by Peter Drucker. And before that, we had read, he wrote a lot of books.
A lot of books.
But his big one was called Management. It's a big old red back book. And we had a breakfast group that met, I think, every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock for like a year and a half and read through that thing. We'd read, the next chapter, and we'd talk as far as we could, and then we'd go home, go to work, and then get back together. So we studied that book a lot. So we'd go up there and listen to that, and he and Bob Greenleaf, coincidentally, had been next door neighbors at one time in California.
I didn't know that.
And he told me that Esther disapproved of him drinking Coca-Cola because it had Coke in it.
And that's the worst he did.
Yeah, but I asked, I don't know, Drucker, probably was a doctor. I probably called him Dr. Drucker.
Dr. Drucker.
You could go up, and at the end, and he'd sign books and shake your hand. And I said, Bob Greenleaf told me he knows you. Do you know him? And he said, I can remember exactly what he said. He said, "Bob Greenleaf, one of the few truly wise men I've ever known." And he'd known a lot of people. And he used to have Greenleaf up to his classes when he was teaching at New York University. I think it was New York University. He'd have him come in. While Greenleaf was still at AT&T, I think.
Those movements, one man can start a movement. One woman can start a movement.
Yeah.
One child can start a movement. A great idea, a true idea.
Yeah.
And you built the whole company around it. In terms of servant leadership, I want to stay on it for just one more moment, Jack, because the value of it is just what it says. It's leadership with the mindset that you are a servant to the people.
Those led, yeah.
Right? Not over the people, but through the people.
Yeah. We actually draw our org chart upside down.
Do you?
With the CEO at the bottom and the frontline workers at the top and the customers above that. Sometimes we drive both ways. But
I like that. So when it's all said and done and all the employees are called partners, do they hold each other accountable?
Yes.
How?
Well, we could say a lot of things, but 2 big things. If you want to work at TD, you got to do 2 things. You got to produce business results, whatever your responsibility is, and you have to help those around you grow. And if you can't do both of those things, that's what servant leadership is, helping those around you grow. And I think the best organizations and the best departments within TD build more people than they need. And the worst ones need more people than they build. And TD is a net exporter of talent, and I'm proud of that. I think we build more talent than we need, and we have terminated highly profitable executives that we're not building people.
That one, you've got to do both.
Yeah, you gotta, and when I've done it a time or two, I've thought, a lot of people are going to be upset, and what I mostly got is, where you been, stupid? I could have told you that I shouldn't have been here.
Why didn't you just tell them, Jack?
I know it.
You know, you had a wonderful two other people that worked tightly with you.
Yeah,
I'd love for you to share about the trio
yeah.
and who they were, how you came to work so closely together, and why that was important.
Yeah. Well, it's Ben Houston and Bob Ferguson. Ben got there several years ahead of me, and he was his folks were friends of my folks, and that's how they got connected. And one of the things Ben asked Dad when he was interviewing him was, I going to come to work there? Because thought, he was sort of thinking maybe I'll be CEO someday. And Dad said no, and he didn't think so, and I didn't think so. Turned out that wasn't right. But anyway, so then Bob, I hired him 3 or 4 years after I got there from Texas Power and Light. And so the three of us worked together for 40 years. And one of as I told you, my wife told me to say, I find this interesting.
I find this interesting. I like that.
When we were hiring new people, particularly mid-level or higher people, we had an industrial psychologist that would do Myers-Briggs tests, personality tests. I don't know what they all were. And we were using that as part of our screening process. And somehow Bob and Ben and I said, why don't we go do that? Let's go take that stuff. So we did. And up to then, I think we were different. And I think each of us thought it would be better. We're good. We like each other, but it'd be better if you two guys were more like me. And Ben thought, if you two guys were more like me. And Bob, same. So we did. And then the guys met with us individually and then met with us together and said, you guys are really different. And so that's good. And what you need to do is use the strengths of each of you. And so when you got a big construction project that's in trouble, send Ben Houston in. He'll fix it.
He's the fix-it guy.
Yeah. If you got a operation somewhere that's sort of struggling with their mojo, send Bob down. He'll talk to them and help them do some strategic planning and get them aligned again. And I don't know what I did, but so anyway, and so that really changed, the next 25 years after we sort of said, it's good that we're different, not wish we were more the same.
That's so fascinating because even today, Jack, I find that, you tell me if you think this is true or not, people hire, train, and promote in their own image. That's still going on.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I disagree with it, but
we can't all be alike.
No.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So many things to talk about with you. Your dad was very involved in education.
Uh-huh.
And I so appreciated your story about him.
What he was really involved with was race relations.
Okay.
And but they were trying to desegregate schools across the South, but in Dallas, and they submitted a couple plans that the local judge had approved, but the Fifth Circuit disapproved. And the judge knew Dad and knew that Dad was trusted across the races. And so he asked Dad to put together a group. Dad pulled 20 people together, leaders from each of the races, and to try and come up with a desegregation plan. And they worked at it for 8 or 9 months, and everybody knew who was on this committee. They called it a task force. So the papers were all trying to, get them to tell what's going on, but nobody said anything. They met, I think, every Tuesday afternoon for 8 or 9 months. And then one day, Dad was downtown walking to a meeting and collapsed on the street. And ambulance came, took him to the hospital. Turned out he'd had heart failure, not a heart attack, but heart failure. I don't know what the difference is, but and they put a pacemaker in him. He was in there 2 or 3 weeks, and the group fell apart. And they were talking to the newspapers and saying, you know, they're got some really bad ideas. No, they got some bad ideas and all that stuff. But then the doc said, okay, to my dad, you can go home, but you cannot go back into that. That's too stressful. That's what caused this problem, and you can't do that. Well, a week later, he got them back together, and a month or so later, they finished it. And that's how we desegregated schools peacefully in Dallas. Not happily for a lot of people, but peacefully. And that was pretty rare for big cities then in the South to do that.
That's quite a feat.
Yeah, and he died a few years later, 4 or 5 years later. And he was 67. I'm pretty sure that shortened his life.
That's young.
Yeah.
That's really young.
Yeah, my mother lived to be 99 and a half. I'm trying to track her.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
You know, you have been so involved also in education.
Uh-huh.
And what's been one of your greatest joys of all of the community activities that you've been involved in?
Well, certainly 9 years on the Dallas School Board, 3 as president. We made some real progress, and we got one of my biggest accomplishments, or I thought, was the annual appraisal of the superintendent was purely subjective of the trustees. And I put a team together to come up with a more objective appraisal. And where we went from, and there was, I can't remember exactly, but 50% was going to be on academic achievement, 30% was going to be on financial management, and 20% or something was going to be on stakeholder satisfaction. And the stakeholders were the students and their parents was one set of stakeholders. The owners, which is the taxpayers, the employees, and maybe they're just 4, and the trustees. Those were going to be the 4 stakeholder groups. And we actually did surveys. We didn't just
did it right.
Yeah, we did it just
right.
Like you do a Gallup survey or something. So the trustees went from 100% to 4%.
Oh my goodness.
And it was much more objective about, and we had goals, and how we doing against the graduation rates and reading at the 3rd grade level or whatever it was. Well, another one that I was particularly proud of at the school district, while I was president, we had a big financial bust. And we had I can't remember, I think it turned out to be about a $70 million budget overrun. And that's out of $1.5 billion, but still, it's a big number. And we didn't figure it out till a month or so after the year was over. We didn't spot it during the course of the year. Ooh. So, and there was a lot of push to get rid of the superintendent. And I thought, it's Mike Lane Host who's back now, but I thought he was doing a good job on the education side. If that wasn't working, I couldn't help him. But I can help you with finances. And so I supported him, and we kept him, and we got the budget. We had a surplus the next year. And I chaired, it's crazy, I chaired 5 boards that year.
In a year?
That year, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And we changed 3 CEOs. So that's just a coincidence, but it's not that I'm not unwilling to make a change if I think it's the right thing for the organization. I just didn't think it was the right thing for the organization, and I think I was right because things gone well.
So many community activities. In fact, I want to bring accolades to you on receiving the National Association of Corporate Directors Lifetime Achievement Award. And one of your teachable points of view is to give back, and you certainly have. Here's what I wrote down, speaking of boards. You tell me if this is right. You've served on 30 nonprofit boards,
Yep.
chaired 15 of them.
Yes.
on 9 other boards and
Corporate
chaired
boards,
corporate
yeah.
boards and chaired 3 of them.
Yes.
That's a lot of boards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's what I want the audience to hear. So many beautiful things were said about you. I'm quoting.
Didn't ask my wife.
Quote, "You've cast a tremendous leadership shadow, Jack, to the many people you've touched. Jack Lowe is a complete leader." Isn't that lovely? A complete leader.
Very generous, yeah.
And Jack has a moral center from where he makes decisions. How's that make you feel?
Yeah, I appreciate whoever said that.
That's quite something. They say that at the top, I've heard many people who are at the top say this, it gets lonely at the top. Is that true?
No, I wasn't lonely. I had Bob and Ben, but others. No, it was, there were decisions I had to make, and there were some hard ones. But no, it wasn't lonely at all. I loved it.
And part of that is because you had partners around you.
Yeah.
I want to go to your teachable points of view and have you expand on some of them. Jack, one of them is trust until people prove they are not trustworthy.
Yeah. Well, I think there's sort of 2 ways you can go about that. One, you can, not trust somebody till they prove they're trustworthy, but that takes a long time.
It takes energy.
And or you can just trust them, and every once in a while you get a big disappointment, but it's much faster. It's much easier, and I think it builds relationships much faster. So I just that's what I've always done, and I've gotten punched in the nose a few times about it too, because they turned out they weren't trustworthy. But 99 times out of 100, they are.
And that's good to hear, because yes, we all have those times when, gosh, we really felt like somebody was trustworthy, and then find out they're not.
Yeah.
But you just don't let that bother you. You just keep on.
Yeah.
All right, here's another one. If what you do is who you are, it's hard to retire.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard to retire?
No, not at all. I was talking to Harold about it today. No, it was easy. It was easy. And I had other things. I'd just run for the school board a couple of years earlier, knowing I was going to retire. But no, it was easy. It was easy. It wasn't I was very proud of what I did, but I hear people, if you ask some people, who are you? They'll say, I'm CEO of TDIndustries.
Right.
I don't think I ever said that. If I did, I didn't mean it. It's not who I was. It's what I did, and I was proud to do it, and I worked hard at it. But it wasn't who I was. I was more. Wasn't near as important as being a dad and a husband.
No. Get your priorities
being
straight.
a friend.
But that is unusual, I have to say. There's just a lot of people who retire and they were
Agonized.
and still are
Yeah.
who they were,
Yeah.
and now they're not. And oh
You
my
mentioned
goodness.
the 3 of us that worked together. One of us, that was harder for him.
Yeah. Well, everyone is different.
Yeah, but we
All right.
knew we were retiring. In fact, we met, I think, once a month for 5 years. Went to lunch to talk about this retirement and how we're going to live through it. And had one of my best friends was Kearney Leday, and Kearney, he was actually on our board as well. And Kearney, and he had retired from Xerox Corporation, so he had been through it. So we'd get together and talk about it, and sort of prepared us for it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It should have just gone.
Yeah.
Succession planning. All right. Have each other's back. Take care of what's in front of you, and count on your buddies to take care of what's in front of them. I think that goes to the 80s. And what happened in the 80s, Jack?
Well, in the late 80s, the Texas economy collapsed. All the banks in Texas up until that time were state chartered. There was no Citibank or JP Morgan Chase or anybody like that. They were all state chartered banks. Of the 10 largest banks in Texas, 9 of them went broke. Frost Bank's the only one that survived. Of the 10 largest mechanical contractors in the country, 6 of them were headquartered in Texas. We're the only one that survived. So it was a very, very bad time. But the partners, we did a lot of things. This isn't the only thing that happened, but one of the key things that got us through that, we had a defined benefit retirement plan, and it was $1 million overfunded. Most of them were underfunded, but ours was overfunded. But the only way we could get that $1 million out was to terminate the plan. So I called a meeting of everybody been there over 5 years. They got their pictures on the wall. You've seen them. We call it the Oak Room Council. And so one night we all got together, and I explained to them. They knew things were tough, but they didn't know how bad it was. We owed the bank $15 million. Our bank went broke, so we owed the federal government $15 million because the federal government took over. So we were in dire straits. And I told them there's some things we're going to do, but also that I think we need to terminate that retirement plan. So the company will get $1 million that's overfunded, but we're going to distribute $4 million to us. And I think we need $2 million to survive. I don't know where I came up with that number.
Good number.
Made it up. But and the only place I've talked to bankers, investors, other people, nobody was interested in lending us any money or supporting us. So the only place I know is out of that $4 million. And so that night we actually came up with sort of a fair share formula for, if you've been here, if you're just about to retire, maybe a fair share would be to put 10% back in. If you're 30, maybe 40% back in. I don't remember what the numbers were. And I said, all right, that's the deal. Nobody will know who does it and who doesn't do it. And your job's not contingent on it, but I'm asking for your support. And I went to, met with just about everybody in the company over the next few weeks. Went to job sites and had talked about it. And anyway, if everybody had given the fair share formula, we knew we had to make it more than $1 million because wasn't everybody going to do it.
Right.
We'd have raised $1.5 million. We raised $1.3 million, and it saved the company. So
That's incredible.
That's trust, and that's partnership, and trust. You can't, when you get in a crisis, you can't build trust quite quick. You got to have it going in.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine. I remember the 80s. For so many people, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And don't you wonder now with the COVID, all of the things that are happening?
Yeah.
And the trust that some people, just last night was watching the news, and one of the business owners was being interviewed, and he talked about his little trattoria was coming back. My gosh, because it was family and it was trust and it was all the things you're talking about. And he was so positive, you couldn't help but leave thinking, and he will be back, and he will come back, and that's just great. A couple of more I don't want to leave out. Hold people accountable. You said for those 2 things. Produce business results and help those around you grow. I want to pull back to that just because as people are wanting now, coming back from COVID, everyone is wanting to get back to productivity. In fact, I find that so many people are even more productive working out of their homes. What I'm hearing is, oh my goodness, I'm working more hours, I'm getting more things done. It's actually been good. And so as people come back into the workplace, whatever that looks like, Jack, what piece of advice would you give to, let's say, your partners as they come back?
We're still all in this thing together. One of the things we talked about today is wonder what it does to the culture of love amongst partners to not see each other face to face often. I don't know, you got to see them every day,
Right.
but never, except on TV or on your computer screen.
On the Zoom.
Yeah, that would concern me. That would be a question to me. But it's not my job.
Well, the man in charge, Harold, will be on the show. He'll be talking about that, I'm sure, and many leaders are still trying to figure it all out. No one has all the answers.
I've heard different people say quite different things. I'm on one corporate board still, and they're trying to get everybody back in the office because they think people aren't working as hard at home and aren't getting as much done because they get distractions and one thing and another. Now, they're not wasting time traveling too, but now I don't know if that's right, but that's what they think. And I heard Doug Parker, CEO of American Airlines, speak here a while back or be interviewed. And his executives never quit working from the office. And he wants to get more people back in the office. Now, others are gone and not ever coming back. So I don't know what the right piece is there. The concern I have is, it's a strange word for a business organization, but it took a while for us to spit it out, but love. Do we love each other? Talk to some construction workers, and the guy says, well, love is more, I can't remember the word he used, but and he after a while he said, I think it is love. Even the plumber said it.
He did say it.
Yeah.
And that isn't used in corporate speak, is it?
Yeah, not much. Yeah.
Not much. I've got a couple of zinger questions before we go. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. If you could play any role in Hollywood, what would it be?
Oh, I would not play any role in Hollywood, I don't think. A part in a movie or be a producer?
Sure.
Or
Well,
none of the above.
They come to you and say, you can be a cowboy, or you can be a gangster, or you can be a Romeo. Would you play any of those parts?
I don't think I'm much of an actor, but I like cowboys. I like, I don't know.
We'll put you down for cowboy.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Cowboy.
What should have happened to you and didn't?
Well, I told you recently that my wife died. And we were coming up on my second wife, incidentally. But we were coming up on 34 years. But we had 30 incredible years and 3 kind of tough ones as she went through a long, slow decline. And that's 10 to 1. I'm a gambler. I'll take 10 to 1 odds anytime I can get them. And people asked me, they were surprised when Dad died that I wasn't more upset. And I'm sure this is partly a coping mechanism, but my attitude was I was so lucky to have him in my life for 40 years. It would be ungrateful to say I wished I'd had him 60. I thought I had the possibility of playing pro football. Thought I had the possibility of being CEO of General Electric, and that didn't happen. And that's fine. I've been so lucky in my whole life that there's a few things went this way and that way that wasn't what I was expecting at the time. But I'm just blessed. I've been lucky. Better be lucky than smart. So I've been lucky.
Any day, right. Yeah. Jack, I don't have any more questions after that. That is probably one of the most beautiful answers of losing someone, more than one person, that anyone could give. And again, that just says so much about who you are. So with all sincerity and from my heart, thank you. Thank you for just being real, for the years you have given this city, our community, and of course your company.
Yeah.
So I am proud to wear this hat and say, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie.
And y'all come back. You hear? That's what we say in Texas. Until next time, we just say be blessed and stay happy. Think gratitude. There's way too many things that you cannot be grateful for. Forget about it. Be grateful. It really helps. When you're grateful, you can't think about what you don't have. That's it for now. See you next week.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.